Wells of Silence by TheBeckster, Chapter 19. Anakin was shaken awake in the early hours of the morning by a pale and anxious Padme. "Annie, wake up. We have to evacuate the building." Her brain was slow to process the information. She'd only just been up an hour ago with the twins. "Evacuate? Why?" Padme's response was interrupted by a vulture droid craning past the window, with the Republic fighter hot on its tail. Anakin scrambled out of bed into the window for a better look. The city had become a battleground, and it extended all the way up into the sky. The upper atmosphere was littered with explosions and debris cloud. Droids seemed to be raining down upon the city. Separatists attacked the city. They kidnapped Chancellor Palpatine. We're evacuating to the bunkers. Anakin's blood ran cold. So this was what the Separatists had been planning. This was what she had sensed coming. They were going to assassinate the Supreme Chancellor or hold him hostage and use that to control the entire galaxy. She turned back to Padme. "I have to help." "Anakin, are you ready? It's only been a week. What if I have to help the Chancellor, Padme? I owe him that much." Padme nodded in resignation. "I know. Just be careful, Anakin. Stay safe. We need you." A cocky smirk crossed Anakin's lips. "I always am." She kissed Padme quickly and ran to change clothes. Getting to the temple was easy enough. Her speeder was small and fast. The droids wouldn't bother trying to track it when they had bigger threats in their sights. Convincing the Jedi to let her join the fight would be more difficult. She was able to pick up the details of what had happened over various comm channels during her flight. At least she wouldn't be walking in blind expecting the Jedi to fill her in. They'd probably use her lack of information as an excuse to keep her grounded or send her back home. She slipped to a hangar, skirting between departing ships, and found the corner where she knew her starfighter would be. Apparently her arrival was expected, as Yoda, Mace Windu, and Obi-Wan were waiting for her. The hangar crew was already busy preparing her fighter. Obi-Wan looked concerned as she hopped out of the speeder, no doubt taking note of Anakin's slight hesitance in her movements. He looked tired, like he hadn't had much chance to rest over the last few days. Judging by the state of things, he was probably fresh from Mandalore, and had only come planet-side to quickly strategize with the other masters, and hopefully to wait for Anakin. Windu openly glared at her. Yoda was unreadable, but Anakin knew she was not welcome in this hangar. Too bad. "I'm here to help," she declared, marching over to her yellow fighter. R2 was being lowered into his socket. "You no longer hold an obligation to the Order." Windu's voice was cold as the ice on Hoth. Anakin matched his glare. "I'm not here for the Order. I'm here for the Chancellor." "In conditioned for battle." "You are not," Yoda commented sharply. "I've recovered my strength." Anakin turned her glare to the small master. "I'm still the best pilot in the Republic and one of the strongest fighters. I'm your only hope to get the Chancellor back alive." She turned her glare back to Windu. "And you know that, otherwise you wouldn't have had my fighter prepared." Mace blinked first, confirming Anakin's suspicions. They knew she would be coming back for this, and they knew she was too valuable to keep out of this fight. "You will be accompanying Master Kenobi in the skies. Keep in mind, Skywalker, you no longer hold any title, rank, or command." His voice remained cold and flat, as if he were addressing a mindless drone. "I know. Master Yoda and I will be leading the ground defense. Master Kenobi." Windu physically turned away from Anakin. "May the Force be with you." Anakin was stung by his insult. So this was how the Jedi saw her now. Not even worthy of the simplest courtesy. Fine then, she didn't need any of them anymore. She had Padme, she had her children, and when she rescued him, she would have the Chancellor's help. If she was dead to the Jedi were dead to her. She held her tongue as the two masters walked away, not giving them the satisfaction of knowing she was insulted, not wishing them luck or offering the blessing of the Force. Instead, she turned her back on them and began the pre-flight check of her fighter. She jumped slightly when Obi-Wan's hand fell on her shoulder. Anakin, are you sure you're ready for this? She knocked Obi-Wan's hand off her shoulder. I'm fine. Are you sure? It's only been... I said I'm fine, Anakin snapped. Now, get ready, or I'm taking off without you. She could see Obi-Wan reflected in the transparental of the cockpit. He stood there, arms at his side, somber expression on his face. I'm sorry it came down to this, but you knew the Council would discover the truth. You knew how this would end. Anakin sighed softly. I know, but it doesn't matter now. I'm better off without them. Anakin hoisted herself up into the cockpit. Now, let's go. The longer we wait, the more time Grievous has to get away with the Chancellor, or worse. Obi-Wan didn't say anything, but Anakin could sense he still held some reservations about her joining the fight. Truthfully, Anakin had her doubts. She still hadn't fully recovered her physical strength, and she would have to rely on the Force more heavily than usual to get through the upcoming battle. But with Obi-Wan at her side, they would be able to defeat Grievous and rescue Palpatine. Anakin scowled as she adjusted her headset. The timing on this attack was terrible. She spent 5 months by the Chancellor's side almost every day, and then she's gone for a week and Grievous decides to come calling? Pregnant or not, she was still the best fighter in the Order. Grievous would not have escaped her alive. Instead, Shakti, Fal, Modama, and Ruran Korob had been the Jedi assigned to protect the Chancellor, and their performance was appalling. She couldn't help but sneer a little. 3 Jedi, one of whom was a master, weren't able to do what she could do on her own? The Order was screwing itself by expelling her. She was almost going to enjoy watching the Jedi trip over themselves as they tried to restore balance and peace to a war-torn galaxy without relying on their precious chosen one to do their dirty work. Then a pang of guilt struck her heart. Out of the 3 Jedi, only Shakti had survived Grievous' assault, and she was touch and go. Her cockpit sealed with a hiss, and Anakin took a moment simply appreciating the silence and the familiar motions of her pre-flight checks. She had really missed flying. R2 beeped at her, his message reading out on her screen. All systems were ready. Anakin turned on her comm. Are you ready, Obi-Wan? I'm ready. Take the lead, Anakin. I'll be right behind you. Anakin took off, clearing the hangar in a matter of seconds. The Force guided her through a clear path up and away from the fighting in the city and to the explosive battle above. Anakin could see why Grievous and Dooku had lain low for so long planning this attack. They had put much of the Separatist forces into this battle. Droid fighters swarmed like flies and cruisers were everywhere. Anakin could see more and more Republic cruisers jumping in from hyperspace, clone fighters pouring out of them. Flak exploded everywhere. Shrapnel flew freely, ready to tear through an unshielded hull, and energy blasts buffeted Anakin's fighter. It was utter chaos. Anakin was back in her element. With the help of the Force, she could sense the whole battle playing out as if it was laid out on a table for her. Anakin always seemed to thrive in the heat of a space battle, weaving her fighter in between droid fighters and friendly fire. In the early days of the war, it had almost been something like fun. In a strange way, it was almost relaxing, and Anakin found herself slipping into that comfortable focus easily. R2, scan the Chancellor's beacon. The droid squawked back at her almost instantly. I know there's a lot of interference, but I know you can find him. Anakin, I'm switching to the clone frequency, Obi-Wan recommended. he had fallen into position off her right wing. Good idea. Anakin switched over just as a Republic fighter screamed past her, and Obi-Wan with a handful of vulture droids on his tail, the clone pilot calling for assistance. Anakin pursued without hesitation, picking off droids. Obi-Wan followed closely. When the vulture droids were all destroyed, they peeled away from the fighter, weaving between laser blasts. The clone thanked them, already pursuing a new droid. Then a familiar voice filled Anakin's ear. There's only one pilot I know who can fly like that. It's good to see you again, General Skywalker. Anakin grinned. It's good to hear from you too, Rex. Where have you been, sir? I'm afraid that is a very long story, not suited for open comms, but I promise I'll tell you after we rescue the Chancellor. Knowing you, I'm sure it's bound to be one heck of a story, sir. Something like that, Rex. Anakin chuckled. But the rest of her reply was interrupted by R2. She took a second to read his message. Obi-Wan, I found the Chancellor. He's on the invisible hand. I thought he might be on Grievous' flagship. Do you know where he is? What it is? Not exactly, but it is a safe bet it's one of those cruisers over there in that cluster. R2 was working through the interference to pinpoint it exactly. They flew toward the cluster of cruisers, taking out what droids they could, keeping their ears tuned to the comms. This is Red Leader. I've got tri-fighters on my tail. I can't shake them. Anakin recognized the voice of her replacement, General List. She could see his fighters cutting through the battle. Within easy reach of her blaster, the tri-fighters were hot on his tail. Hang in there, Red Leader. We've got you in our sights. Line up the tri-fighters and we'll take them out. The words had barely left her mouth when a blast from the tri-fighter hit List square on. In less than a second, he was just a cloud of debris floating in space. Anakin swore sharply under her breath. Luckily, the fighters were still lined up perfectly. She and Obi-Wan were able to pick off two before they could recognize him as a new target. The third picked Anakin as a target. She and Obi-Wan outmaneuvered and destroyed it relatively easily. I think I found the hand, Anakin. Obi-Wan's voice was tight. Anakin knew his stomach had just dropped, and he was clutching his jaw tightly. Its crawling was vulture droids. Oh, well, this will be fun. You have a very skewed definition of fun, Anakin. Anakin dusted herself off, unable to help the cocky smile she flashed to Obi-Wan. That could have been worse. Could have been a lot better, Obi-Wan shot back, flicking a hot piece of sharpnel off his sleeve. Just because you haven't been almost blown up in 6 months doesn't mean the rest of us have been as fortunate. At her side, R2 squawked indignantly in agreement with Obi-Wan. Anakin chuckled and brushed her hair out of her face, in turn smearing soot over her forehead. She patted her astromech affectionately. See if you can find the Chancellor, R2. He beeped and wheeled over to the computer port. Anakin and Obi-Wan silently surveyed the wreckage their fighters had caused while the droids searched. They were definitely going to have to find another ride off his ship once they had the Chancellor. Obi-Wan's fighter was little more than a charred mark on the hangar floor, and hers was missing most of its left wing. After a minute, R2 beeped excitedly. He's up on the observation deck, Anakin translated. Both Grievous and Dooku are on the ship. Obi-Wan rubbed at his beard. I sense Dooku is guarding the Chancellor. Grievous is orchestrating the attack from the bridge. Anakin nodded. Our first priority should be the Chancellor, but it would be nice to end this war once and for all. This is undoubtedly a trap. Both separatist leaders on the same ship, not leaving as soon as they had the Chancellor secured. It's highly suspicious. Well, we do have a policy for traps. Spring 'em. Anakin smirked and turned to R2. Stay here, R2. Stay by the terminal. We'll probably need your help. Keep in touch. Obi-Wan tossed his spare comm link to the droid. R2 caught the comm with a confident whistle. The two Jedi gave each other one last look before jogging out of the hangar. On the observation deck of the Invisible Hand, two dark-robed figures watched a weak blue security hologram with great interest. Skywalker seems to be in top fighting shape, the apprentice commented neutrally. Yes, the master mused. She had recovered her strength much faster than I expected. Even for one as young and powerful as her. They fell into silence as the duo of Jedi opted to take a more circuitous route rather than face on an oncoming patrol of battle droids. Both Thith reached the same conclusion as Skywalker allowed herself to show a moment of weakness while her partner's back was turned. She is using a force crutch. The apprentice stroked his beard thoughtfully. If she is weakened, she will only fight more fiercely, the master completed. I warn you not to underestimate her drive to protect her children, my apprentice. She will go to unexpected lengths. It will only make her fall easier, master. Yes, exploit her weakness and drive her to the dark side. Then it will only be a matter of time. And Kenobi? A wicked smile crossed the face of the master as the pair of holograms approached a large bank of elevators. He will die today. Anakin and Obi-Wan found the main elevator bank with relatively little trouble and a few creative detours. They were trying to avoid making too much noise until they rescued the Chancellor. A few dismantled droids wouldn't be missed. An entire sentry patrol, on the other hand, would certainly raise the alarm. They had the briefest moment to catch their breath before an elevator came. Anakin was only mildly surprised when the doors opened to reveal several battle droids. She and Obi-Wan cut them down in a matter of seconds. She had misses fighting alongside Obi-Wan. They truly were an incredible, unbeatable team. She wished that she hadn't been expelled, that the Jedi weren't going to cast her out. Her excommunication would mean that she was going to lose Obi-Wan. As a council member, he wouldn't be able to maintain his friendship with her. There was a stigma with the Fallen, and he had his loyalties to the Order. At the very least, they had this final mission together. The last droid fell to pieces between them, and Anakin flashed Obi-Wan a tense smile. He turned away to enter a command into the lift controls. She leaned against the wall, breathing heavily and pressing a hand to her stomach. She had hoped the grimace was off her face before Obi-Wan turned back around, but he wasn't fooled. What's wrong? Anakin squared her shoulders. but then didn't see the point in hiding. Nothing really. Just nobody told me I'd still be cramping and bleeding a week after giving birth, that's all. She slumped back against the wall and took advantage of their short reprieve. Obi-Wan frowned at her. Will you be all right? Anakin breathed a laugh. I've definitely been in better shape, but I've also been worse. Obi-Wan opened his mouth to speak, but she waved him off. I'll be fine. I just need to catch my breath. They both stumbled slightly as the elevator jolted to a stop and the lights flickered. Anakin and Obi-Wan shared a look. Power failure? She suggested. Or they know we're here. Well, see if R2 can get us moving again. She looked up to the elevator ceiling and cringed. I really don't feel like climbing up an elevator shaft if I can avoid it. She pulled out her comlink. R2, activate elevator 31174. There was a moment of silence. The elevator didn't move. Obi-Wan gave her a skeptical look. He's probably just avoiding a patrol is all, she explained defensively. You sure he doesn't have a loose wire? Your droid has always been a bit buggy. Anakin was quite affronted. I just gave him a tune-up and an upgrade. She glared at Obi-Wan and spoke into the comlink again. R2, are you there? We need you to activate elevator 31174. Send us up to the observation deck. This time the droid responded, and the elevator was moving again in a matter of seconds. Anakin shot Obi-Wan a rather smug look. See? He's in perfect condition. Obi-Wan shook his head, but made no further comment on her astromech. As the lift got closer to the observation deck, Obi-Wan fixed Anakin with a serious look. Are you ready? Anakin nodded, gathering the force to her. She would need to keep herself strengthened, yet blocked off to keep Dooku from learning anything sensitive. I'm ready. This time, we'll do this together. Anakin half smiled at Obi-Wan. I was just about to say that. The lift door slid open. Anakin felt Dooku's cold presence wash over her like a slimy, foul tide. He stood beside a single large chair on a dais before an expansive window. They had a clear view of the battle raging outside. Two super battle droids flanked the Sith. Dooku looked to Anakin and Obi-Wan. As they stepped forward, he smirked at them knowingly and pushed the chair around. The Chancellor came into view. He was shackled to the chair, but looked unharmed otherwise. Anakin, my dear, I'm surprised to see you. A protective flare of anger burned in Anakin's chest. If they had hurt the Chancellor, they would pay for it. Chancellor, are you all right? Did they hurt you? No, I'm all right, considering. Palpatine glanced up at Dooku and shifted his hands, making the shackles clank against the chair. Skywalker and Kenobi. The Republic's dream team back together again. The Sith drawled in his smooth, deep voice that carried across the observation deck quite clearly. It's been so long. We were afraid something had happened to you, Skywalker. Anakin and Obi-Wan paused at the top of the stairs, looking down at Dooku and his droids, sizing up the situation. I've been training and getting stronger so I can take you down for good this time, she replied, forcing her old arrogance back into her voice. The Sith laughed and began pacing guidedly like a predator coming upon easy prey. Anakin could feel him probing. She strengthened her shields. You disappeared from the war for 6 months to train. Dooku laughed again. No, that's not it. You have been preoccupied with. He paused, his pacing a malicious, curious look crossed his face, and he turned to Anakin. Your children. Scorching fury flushed through Anakin's veins. She saw red. Obi-Wan shot her a sharp look. Dooku smiled. He knew he'd struck a nerve. So, that's where you've been. My, it's a surprise you're still in Jedi robes. They haven't banished you yet. Dooku chuckled darkly. He turned his eyes to study Obi-Wan. They wouldn't happen to be yours, would they, Kenobi? Anakin felt like she could spit fire. She was absolutely furious, but besides her, Obi-Wan seemed immune to Dooku's taunts. She did her best to imitate him. Obi-Wan held Dooku's gaze and spoke evenly. He almost sounded bored. Count Dooku. By order of the Galactic Senate of the Republic, you are under arrest. This is your only chance to surrender. Dooku elected to ignore Obi-Wan's warning. Finally breaking eye contact after a long moment, he strolled around the Chancellor's chair again, dragging one hand along the back. No, I suppose they aren't yours. You're still pining after that Mandalorian. He laughed once humorlessly. Historically, an ill-fated match. Anakin could tell Dooku had struck a nerve with her friend. Outwardly, there wasn't much to show other than a tightening of his jaw. But she could feel the pain stirred up in him. She set her resolve even firmer. Dooku was threatening her family. He was going to die for that. I suppose that the identity of the father really isn't important. After all, the mother is the parent of true interest. The Sith strode off the dais and planted himself in the center of the room. He motioned to the battle droids. They raised their blasters and began advancing on the Jedi. When I have disposed of you, they will become viable pawns for my master. Over my dead body, Anakin snarled. She shed her outer robe and ignited her lightsaber. An identical flash of blue in the corner of her eye showed her Obi-Wan had done the same. Dooku laughed again, drawing his own lightsaber. That's the idea, my dear. End of chapter.